On the podcast today, we have the second episode of the 196 meditations on the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. And we will be speaking about Sutras 12 to 19 today. And we'll break this up into two sections, where 12 to 16 we'll talk about what it takes to actually practice yoga, and then the last three are about sort of how the deeper elements of practicing yoga and what yoga actually means. And we're not talking about practicing hatha yoga here. We're talking about the traditional yoga from Patanjali. So like I said, we'll break that up into two. So we'll begin with 12 to 16. You want to read that, love?
Yeah, so verse 12 to 16. Both practice and non-reaction are required to still the patterning of consciousness. Practice is a sustained effort to rest in that stillness. This practice becomes firmly rooted when it is cultivated skillfully and continuously for a long time. As for non-reaction, one can recognize that it has been fully achieved when no attachment arises in regard to anything at all, whether perceived directly or learned. When the ultimate level of non-reaction has been reached, pure awareness can clearly see itself as independent from the fundamental qualities of nature.
Okay. So the important part in 12, actually through these 7 sutras altogether, is this idea of practice and non-reaction, or renunciation. So practice here being abhyasa in Sanskrit, and non-reaction slash renunciation, vairagya. And a lot of people have probably heard you and I speak about vairagya a lot
yes.
on the podcast, because it's very important in actually all of the Eastern traditions. It's a fundamental practice that if you can't cultivate that, or you can't sort of practice that, then it makes meditation very difficult to go deeper. And so, as we said, like both practice and non-reaction are required to still the patterning of consciousness. So we're talking about nirodha here, right? So we're talking about the stilling the patterning of consciousness.
Yes.
Chitta vritti nirodha, again, from the first episode, if people remember. This is what the practice of yoga is. It's about stilling the whirlpools of the mind, or essentially the activity of the mind that keeps us in ragya, in
Yes.
reaction. And
yes. And yeah, practice is a sustained effort to rest in that stillness. Again, that sustained effort, and that's very tricky part. I think that's what kind of effort do we need to? It has to be sustained. It has to be continuous, and in continuous practice that's constant.
yes.
But then, what kind of effort? It's like, again, we were talking about before, like when you want to reduce the sugar consumption in your diet, for example. Like if you were to have a lot of sugar every day, knowingly or unknowingly, but then when you want to cut off all that sugar out of your diet, but after like 2-3 days, you will have strong cravings, right? Because you initially get rid of that part of diet which was taken big part of your diet, right? You have a strong cravings.
Yes.
So that same with this effort, when we put this effort to still the mind, to still the patterning of of consciousness, then what happens is that there is that strong urge to like go back to that patterning of consciousness.
Yes.
Continue to think the thoughts and continue to ruminate in the thought and immerse in that emotional state and this and that.
Yep.
So the funny thing is, initially, more effort that we get to put in, this experience gets more intensified.
Yes.
Right. That's what we need to understand. That any kind of effort, more stronger the effort you put in, the experience becomes more like obstructed by intensified thoughts.
Yes. Well, there's like it's kind of paradoxical, right? Like, because sustained effort is required, right? Like, especially at the beginning of any sort of spiritual practice. So, because what you're practicing is kind of your will to realign with the present moment awareness. So, like when we talk about Nirodha, we talk about the essence of yoga practice is to remain in the present moment where Purusha exists. So, where the pure awareness is. But the problem is when you go to sit to meditate, Prakriti is alive, fully alive, so including your thoughts, your emotions, your sense of self, body sensations. You sit down, your body wants to move, twitch, or, all of these things, but you've kind of said, I'm stopping the game of Prakriti for a moment here,
Yes.
So, some effort is required,
Yeah.
but it can be problematic.
Yeah.
Further in your practice,
Yeah.
as we go further into your practice.
Yeah.
But at the beginning, it's kind of required because the forces of distraction are so powerful in the world. That's the problem, right? So we live, especially in this day and age, right? Like, the forces of distraction are horrendous.
Yeah.
So Patanjali was talking about this in the 2nd century BCE. I mean, they didn't have Facebook or Twitter or things like of this nature, and didn't have people with very stern views and opinions. That was not how it was back in the 2nd century BC. We didn't have like massive, large scale societies, and we didn't know many other different cultures from wherever we may have existed. So, but that's part of the problem. Is when we're in awareness training at the beginning, you need to sort of have some sort of sustained effort. But you can't, like you said, you can't exhaust yourself in that process. Like lifting weights a lot, right? Like, you want to grow muscles, okay, you need to lift some weights. But if you're sitting there doing dumbbells all day like this, I mean, your elbows are gonna blow out, your muscles are gonna, you're gonna tear your muscle.
I think we need to find a sweet spot, right? Like you said, we need a bit of effort, of course.
Yeah.
We need to be able to at least sit in the lotus posture to get ourselves into the meditation practice, for example, that kind of effort. And that effort has to be sustained, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, let's say, for example, if our goal that we want to achieve, so-called, through the meditation practice or any other spiritual practice, then effort gets more and more intensify. I think that would when the problem can come. I think because again, more that's kind of forcing, right?
Yes.
More there's a force to achieve something.
Yes.
The funny thing is, especially in the spiritual practice, the result is very very clear that you won't get the result that you want, actually.
No.
That's why the sense of effortlessness has to come in, right, in your practice.
Exactly. And like what you said with the goals, that's the perfect sort of perspective of how we should approach our meditation practice, is having no goals. And that's very difficult for a lot of people because, it's Eastern spirituality is constantly counterintuitive, paradoxical, and it's very difficult for especially modern people, no matter whether West or East, to understand. Because when you say you need to apply some effort, but your ultimate goal is to be effortless, it's very strange for people. And then you need to come back into the present moment where Nirodha is, where the stillness actually resides, without being possessed by the turbulence of the mind, but without having that as a goal. And so that becomes very confusing for people. But it's kind of, we've used this example on the podcast a lot, where when Shunrei Suzuki first went to America and was teaching people in Northern California, was teaching them Zen Buddhism and was teaching them Zazen. And, a big part of Zen Buddhism is not having a goal, and you meditate for the sake of meditation. And so a lot of the American students were like, you say that this and that, but then we're doing hours and hours and hours of meditation a day, like sometimes 9-10 hours of meditation a day. Aren't we striving? Like, isn't this a sense of striving?
Right.
And then Shunrei's like, no, this is what Buddhas do. Buddhas meditate. You're not sitting here to
gain something.
to gain something. Yeah, you're not doing this to gain something. And same with, this is what Patanjali is saying. Like, you're not sitting in the lotus posture and meditation to gain something. You're actually trying to get your mind out of this habit of wanting and aversion and attaining.
Yes.
You're trying to get out of that habit, because that's those are the egoic parts of the patterning of consciousness.
Yes.
So, and we want to get out of that habit, so we can then fall into effortlessness, right?
Yeah, to loosen that grip.
Yes, to loosen that grip. Yeah. Exactly. So it did say practice is the sustained effort to rest in the stillness. So just that ability to sort of abide there, right? So you got to train yourself to keep coming back into the here and now, in some sense, until that is kind of effortless, right? Like, so.
Yeah, so I think here the effort, sustained effort, is means that subtle efforts that focus on cultivating the effortlessness.
That's right.
Effort.
Yes.
That's the effort that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Right, and that is to be one of the most important method of practicing is non-reaction, which is vairagya.
Exactly. That's where it comes in. See, that's where vairagya comes in, and where practice makes sense. Because when you say like, abhyasa is focus without exertion, then people go, well, what does that even mean? Because it's hard for me to focus if I'm not
without exertion.
Without exertion, because I'm trying to remain in the present moment. But how can I do that? Vairagya.
Yes.
And this is where they both, and this is why Patanjali explains them as mutual arising opposites. Vairagya and, well, not really opposites, but they are mutual in a sense.
Yes. So like, bit of a effort to get yourself in the practice is needed.
Yeah.
But that effort eventually has to be through vairagya.
Yeah. Well, basically, you got to practice both together, and then maybe if you were a schooled yogic student, then you would know to practice both. From the get-go, where some people may just jump into meditation and just practice meditation. They're all practice with goals in mind and this and that, and not understand that they need a level of non-reactiveness to not only their thoughts and their feelings and their emotions, but also to the world in general.
Yes.
And vairagya, again, essentially means not getting stirred
up. Yeah.
Not getting stirred up. So not getting kind of absorbed in the vrittis of the mind, the mental activity.
Yeah. And I think it's important to understand that whatever arises within you, that is reaction of the thoughts, certain thoughts or emotions. And the reaction itself is that actually accumulation sense of I. We identify as me or I through that reaction, right? Like, for example, you drink a certain tea, I didn't like it, and you judge that tea wasn't very good. And I dislike this tea, I don't like this tea like this. Whereas some other people, they would love the same thing, right? So we identify ourselves through that sort of reaction, simply.
Yes.
And so that more we react to it, more we kind of solidify the sense of I.
Yep.
So the more we don't react to that, then the opposite. Then you start to loosen your grip to the sense of I.
Yes.
So that you kind of being able to see the things as they are, the originality of things, of phenomena or anything, circumstance.
Exactly, because our perception is attuned to our conditioning, as you're saying. It's attuned to our conditioning, where we have likes and dislikes, and this actually builds, as you were saying, the sense of I. It builds a sense of I. Like, I don't like this tea, or I don't like noni fruit, and all of these things. But that solidifies, and this is how deep Patanjali goes. That they are all patterning of consciousness.
Yeah.
That keeps solidifying the sense of I, which then becomes the obstacle to deepen your practice. So that's why vairagya is important. Even not reacting to things that you so-called like or dislike on a subjective level, but just allow things to be as they are. You're allowing life to arise as it will without. We do this thing, right? Most of us do this thing where we commentate on everything that we experience.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't like this.
That's pure ragya. That's pure reaction.
Reaction, yeah.
Yes.
But we are often caught in this habit, right? Just go online, right? Go onto social media, and you'll see ragya in its purest form. So that's the problem, where we're constantly commentating on everything we're doing, and Patanjali is saying that's actually solidifying the sense of self. And then you can't you can't deepen your practice then, because you're constantly working in the field of likes and dislikes of this and that, to use Zhuangzian terminology, and you can't come deeper into the actual here and now, because the likes and the dislikes, the I itself is a product of time. It really is a product of time.
Yes.
It's a product of past, future, whereas the present moment is where eternity exists. It's where the I evaporates.
Yeah, and again, that place is the pure prakriti, the material world,
Yes.
manifested world,
Yeah.
which is again finite. It's impermanent.
Yes.
Yeah, so that it always limits, and it always from that place we start to divide everything, separate everything, so that you solidify a sense of I, you solidify this material world, solidify the prakriti, the movement of this manifested world.
Yes. Yes.
When we go to that rabbit hole, like it's hard to come back, because that energy is very heavy and strong. So that you're just gonna continue to create the patterning of consciousness.
Exactly. Our mind and the way that we unfortunately live in this world is like the Pink Floyd album cover of Dark Side of the Moon, where the prism, the one clear white light goes through the prism and it's fragmented into 7 colors. And that's how our mind is. The awareness is pure, it's clear, it's pure white light, so to speak, right? And then it's fragmented through our persona, our conditioning, and that's how we see the world. Our consciousness is colored, and so we don't see the world as it truly is. And then we have likes, dislikes, conflicts with other people, opinions, and it's all based on reacting and emotions, right?
Again, that eclipse to see the real actuality.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
We become blind to what's really going on, right?
Yeah.
Right? We all have a different look of prisms, right?
Yeah.
And then we judge the way we want to judge, whereas the real actuality is nothing like that.
No. Because all there is Purusha. It's a dance between Purusha and Prakriti, all that's going on in reality from the yogic perspective. And the problem is we're swimming in Prakriti without realizing that Purusha's back here just observing the show, and this is just a temporary show. It's like, it's constantly moving along, where the witness of that is unstained and is pure.
Yeah.
And that's actually our true nature.
Yeah.
But it's more difficult for us to come back into, alignment with that.
Yeah, again, because the Maya, the Prakriti world is always taking your attention away from it.
Yes.
There's that temptation. Isn't there?
Yes. So the point of Vairagya, right, is when you practice Vairagya, when you couple that with Abhyasa, is you're continually subtracting from reality. So you're continually subtracting. And what does that do? That's how you come back to Nirodha.
Yeah.
That's how you come back to Nirodha. So like you're practicing non-reaction and kind of mental renunciation, and a feeling will come. This is how I ordinarily react to. But then you have a firm abidance in Purusha, and you're like, I'm not gonna react to that. And so what you're doing then is you're not giving those thoughts and emotions, likes and dislikes, what have you, any juice.
Yes.
You're not fueling them with your attention. You are seeing them, but you're distancing yourself from
That's
them.
Right. Purely kind of you're acknowledging that feeling is there, right? But then you remain as Purusha.
Yeah.
through your breathing exercise or the sensation.
Just awareness.
Yeah, awareness, yes.
Yes.
Awareness of your body sensation and breathing and whatnot. So, yeah, like whatever, I need to concentrate, this itself is an effort, and this itself is a thought as well. So when this comes, just leave it as it is.
Yes.
Not give any more fuel to it, just remain the awareness, that pure awareness state.
Yeah. And even the vairagya, and we're not just talking just about in the practice too, we're talking about in ordinary life as you're walking around doing your daily chores and whatnot, about practicing vairagya like that, you know. So then when you're continually not reacting to what the world or how you would normally react to the world, then you're starting to subtract from yourself, your sense of self, and then next minute, then you start to have more of spaciousness within your consciousness, and you start to reflect the actual nirodha. You start to become a reflection of stillness, and that's, you know, really important within any spiritual cultivation, is that sense of vairagya.
And also, I think, in a sense that the emotional reaction or any kind of thoughts that arises, that itself is very momentary.
Yeah.
That itself is comes and goes.
Yeah.
The problem is whether we give attention or not.
Yes.
That's what really matters, isn't
Exactly.
it? Like, because emotion passes, and experience also pass.
Yeah.
And do we want to hold on to that experience or emotion? That's the
game. Yeah.
that's the game.
Yeah. It's an attention game.
Yes.
Everything is a game of attention, right? Like you
Attention,
look
yeah.
at anything like in the world these days, it's an attention game.
Yes.
But even in spiritual practice, it's all an attention game too. Where is your attention flowing?
Yeah.
Oh, it's flowing into all of these concerns I have, these problems I have, and it's like, well, that's the reality you're going to live. And you're swimming in vrittis, and you're swimming in mental activity. You know.
Yeah, and your mind is all scattered, and you just hard to find a focus in the one thing then, right?
Exactly. And this is, again, like if you practice vairagya and you are sincere about actual practice, abhyasa, then you'll be able to have like single-pointed concentration for certain activities in that you do.
Yeah.
You know, and you won't be drawn into worldliness and things like this. You know, the world's always vying for your attention. It's going, look at me. Like, you should be angry about this, or you should be happy about this. And Patanjali is saying, stop that game. That keeps reinforcing this sense of identity that you have, which is actually the cause of suffering.
100%.
So the ultimate goal of yoga is freedom from suffering.
Yes.
So to engage in that
Yeah.
is a silly game.
Exactly. Yeah, so when we practice vairagya, and when this practice gets more matured, then then you get to have a sense of effortless effort.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
So that non-reaction becomes kind of your embodied to your whole being, so that you are like we were talking about this last podcast and many times before, that you become disinterested to the worldly things, right? Like that's when you embody the pure non-reactive state of mind, then you start to lose a sense of interest in what's happening in the world.
Yeah. You just have no interest at all.
Yeah, you lose interest in politics and other opinions and all these things.
You're not playing the game of ragya anymore.
No, it's not part of your life anymore.
No. Before we move on to the last three sutras, we should mention in the 16th sutra where it says, when the ultimate level of non-reaction has been reached, pure awareness can clearly see itself as independent from the fundamental qualities of nature. Now, what the fundamental qualities of nature, according to yoga and Samkhya philosophy, are known as the gunas.
Yeah.
And so there's three gunas, and a lot of people are probably familiar with the gunas if you've ever been introduced to Hindu philosophy. So you have sattva or sattvic, and that's kind of pure, or you could say luminosity. And this arises when consciousness grows more transparent, so through practice and through lifestyle and everything like that. So
you can somewhat say that this might be the like highest level,
yes,
highest energy of three gunas.
the three gunas, yeah, the purest level of the three
Purest,
gunas.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. Okay.
So like when you refine your consciousness, when you're on the spiritual path, usually people are sattvic, but you know, rajas and tamas can slip in under the door. And so the next one is rajas, which is kind of like motion, which is kind of like this kinetic quality of all experience. So rajas can be very active, very
that movement,
very energetic, and there are a lot of rajasic people in the world. And then the third one is tamas, which is kind of like mass. So think of like solidity and inertia, and often is resistant to change. So
that's very firm to anything. I think just solid,
solid.
Not able to change.
It's can be very stubborn. And,
stubborn.
So in some sense, you know, some people may say that we possess all three gunas, and some may say that we may be more oriented towards one, but express the other two in differing degrees. But what a lot of teachers have said, obviously, to me and you as in our life, is that most people aren't sattvic. You know what I mean? Like it's very rare to find sattvic people in a world that's ragya, because that's complete rajasic and tamasic.
Yes.
And even I've been around some teachers where some people actually say that can be a lot of tamas with some teachers, and sometimes a lot of rajas with some teachers. I won't mention the teachers personally, but the whole point of this sutra is that Purusha itself, pure awareness, is guna free.
Yeah.
It's beyond the gunas.
Yes, beyond that quality of nature, beyond the not quality.
Has no
quality.
Has no quality. Yeah.
What, like Naguna Brahman?
Naguna Brahman, yeah.
No quality. Yeah.
And Saguna Brahman is with qualities. Yeah, that's a good point, love. And so the gunas are just a part of Prakriti. They are the qualities of Prakriti.
We're just giving qualities in these three levels to the nature, which is also changing qualities as well.
Yeah.
Whereas again, pure awareness is guna free.
Yeah.
Gluten free.
Gluten free.
Guna free. Yeah. There is no quality because it itself is the purest form of awareness.
Yes.
It's unchanging. Yeah.
So everything in Prakriti, so all the forms and everything they're all constituted by the three gunas. But Purusha itself, being separate from Prakriti, is pure, unstained, eternal, what have you, according to yogic philosophy. So
I just wanted to mention one thing, that the vairagya, the practice itself, is that again effort to being able to allow things happen as well. I think just instead of reacting to things and just you remain as pure awareness state of mind, and then let things, you allow things to be whatever it may be.
Of course, It's kind of similar to Taoism, right? Like you're just allowing life, because in Taoism, vairagya is a massive part. Actually, in Buddhism, it's a massive part as well, where you just allow life to be without you interfering with the stream. Like vairagya, you could say, is kind of, in some sense, related to wu-wei, effortlessness, right? Effortless action or non-doing. So, and you're allowing and you're trusting life to be as it will without any interference. Because what's important, it's not what's going on out here, it's your spiritual cultivation. That's what's important.
And again, remaining in the pure awareness, it's guna free. You're not giving any quality. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So remain in that place is.
So everyone's all out here worried about the science of the gunas, so to speak. Everyone out here is trying to influence this and that in an unconscious way, where yoga is the science of the self. So you've turned your attention in, and you're trying to be, as you said, not gluten-free, but guna-free.
That's more important.
That's more important. So now let's move it on to the last three. At first, the stilling process is accompanied by 4 kinds of cognition: analytical thinking, insight, bliss, and feeling like a self. Later, after one practices steadily to bring all thoughts to a standstill, these 4 kinds of cognition fall away, leaving only a store of latent impressions in the depth of memory. These latent impressions incline one to be reborn after one leaves the body at death and is dissolved in nature. So these are the last 3. And this kind of goes deeper into the obstacles and how we practice with abhyasa and vairagya, right? So
yes, more into nuts and bolts
yes.
of practice.
Yes.
Yeah.
So basically what they're saying in 17 is the stilling process unfolds in stages. So when we are trying to still the mind with Nirodha, we have these kind of 4 kinds of meditation, like you have analytical thinking, insight, bliss, and essentially the self-sense, the
yes.
feeling of itself, right?
Yeah.
So these continue to arise in your deep, sometimes in your deepest meditation, your deepest calm.
Yes.
These 4 meditations or these 4 cognitions.
Yeah, it says like, these cognitions are not everyday thought, but rather are colored by the stilling process.
Yes.
Yeah, it arises within the process of practice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So again, this gets down to the deeper elements of practicing meditation, and as we were talking about with yogic meditation, the original yogic meditation is sitting meditation. Hence, we were talking about before with immobility. So Patanjali is saying sort of that any kind of volitional body mind movement, doesn't matter whether it's physical or mental, all of that constitutes a type of action or karma.
Yeah.
So that, and what does that do? That reinforces samskaras.
Yes.
The latent impressions
Yeah.
or mental subliminal imprints.
Yeah, once you have that, then you also like a kind of refreshing and recreating that samskara
Yes.
as well. If you don't,
Yes.
if you don't pay attention and if you don't will to stop it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, see what happens is, and I talk about this in Fasting the Mind, is this process, not just that process, but anything that we set in motion or the way we act and this and that contributes to that cycle of karma, vasana, samskaras. So karma reinforces your habits and tendencies, which reinforces your samskaras, or plant seeds for future samskaras, so subconscious latent impressions, which then fuels more karma, more action and more unconscious action. And then we're constantly in this cycle. Yeah. And so Patanjali, he understood this, but he took it to an even deeper level where he was talking about these 4 types of cognition.
Yes.
So like...
Yeah, so that eventually these 4 kind of cognition can help this yoking process at the beginning stage of practice, right?
Yes.
It can help forestalling the activating samskaras.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's why he mentioned these 4 stages. But eventually, once the practice go deeper and deeper, then we get to have the full level of concentration, which is dharana.
That's right.
Then these 4 kind of cognition kind of no longer there really. Like it just kind of dissolves itself.
Yes. Yes. And then that leads to jhana, like mental absorption on a single pointed object of knowledge. And so, not an object of knowledge, a single pointed like anchor of meditation.
Yeah,
so.
like absorbed into the complete still point.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Still point.
Exactly. And Patanjali, we were talking about this the other day, Patanjali makes a point here of talking about insight and bliss. A lot of people would think, why are insight and bliss a problem? But Patanjali took it again, as he does, he took it a step further to say that even insight and bliss, we have to, in some sense, overcome. And we have to apply complete vairagya to those as well.
Yeah. Because once we continue to practice, and when your practice deepens and deepens, then you get to the level of this still point of meditation where you not get touched by any kind of thoughts or emotions. Then there's a certain level of blissfulness comes in because there's complete tranquility and peace. So the blissfulness comes naturally. But the problem is that also becomes your attachment.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So I think that's really even more advanced level, that you don't
Yeah.
even get attached by that blissfulness, so that you don't forget your real kind of goal, so to
Yeah.
say. That your real goal is to be free from suffering,
Yeah.
free from attachment, free from these physical manifestations, attachment.
Yeah.
And that blissfulness itself is also kind of a emotional thing, isn't it?
It
Because
can
it
be,
makes
yeah.
you feel good, makes you feel very happy and peaceful. But when it arises, we acknowledge that. But again, we don't give too much attention to that. That is, again, what's important.
Yeah, Patanjali is saying that insight and bliss are kind of like landmarks
Yes.
on the path.
Yeah.
But that's not the actual conclusion. The conclusion is freedom from suffering, right, according to Patanjali.
Yeah.
So having bliss doesn't essentially mean that you are free from suffering.
Yes.
It means you're in a temporary state of consciousness that will pass. And a lot of people have probably, who listen and watch this, have probably heard people talk about they're chasing kind of like the yoga buzz, and all of these things where they might say they practice hatha yoga, or even if they practice tai chi chuan or Taoist practices of that nature, they're chasing the kind of the sensation they get from after practice, but then it becomes an attachment and a vice, and they're constantly chasing that experience. So then they become then overly disciplined without realizing what they're doing and forgetting the core objective of Eastern spirituality, which is freedom from suffering. It doesn't matter how good you are as a practitioner at Tai Chi Chuan or Hatha Yoga or any of this and that. If you've lost sight of the core objective and you're just overly disciplined at a certain practice, that can be an obstacle to actually attaining freedom from suffering. So
yeah, it's kind of ring the bell to me when you mentioned yoga buzz.
yoga buzz, yeah.
Yeah, because a lot of people have that sensation, really like a high energy, blissful energy. But again, as you mentioned, that itself also is very temporary.
Yeah.
It comes and goes.
Well, Patanjali would say that's in the field of Prakriti.
Yes.
That's just another part of it's a more pleasurable experience of Prakriti. And Patanjali's, he's not completely condemning insight and bliss here. He does go to mention that insight and bliss can be beneficial for your growth in your practice, but they can also be an obstacle if that becomes the focus of the practice, as we've been mentioning. And so if you're hunting the yoga buzz, then you're not going to really mature spiritually, and you won't have any there will be no possibility of you actually attaining freedom from suffering.
I don't know if this could be something along that line. Like when certain spiritual teachers and whatnot, when they get deeper into meditation, and then they be in that the state of pure awareness very long period of time, they get to have this magical power, right?
Yeah.
And they often use it to, gain more respect or gain more attention.
Yeah, they get
whatnot.
siddhis and...
Yeah, siddhis, yes. So that is just, again, the byproduct of the spiritual
That's
practice.
all it is, yeah.
And then just like here, bliss and insight, that magical power itself is something actually could be obstructing your reaching the core object of practice.
Well, you can become a circus clown.
Yeah.
Because you have a particular siddhi. This is whether the listeners and people who are viewing this believe in siddhis, but some of the literature says, and I've heard teachers and that say before, that it just, you attain some siddhis from prolonged spiritual practice, and then people get intoxicated with the siddhis, and then they use that as kind of a means to attain maybe a living, or to attain followers, because some people out there unfortunately aren't really attracted to freedom from suffering. They're more attracted to how cool they can be,
levitating,
and this and that. Where most of the great sages would say that siddhis are an obstacle to your actual the core objective of to be free from suffering. And so the thing is that the more one holds on to nirodha, this is the point, right? The more that the point of this practice of abhyasa and vairagya is the more that we can hold on to or abide in stillness, the longer the intervals between mental formations happen.
Yeah, so the interval between complete silence to whatever object arises, whether that's thoughts or emotion, and then the interval becomes longer and longer.
Yep.
More so for silence, obviously. Then you completely get to that level of a jhana, that full absorption. So that's from that place that your samskara has no longer power on you.
No.
You don't get triggered by that latent impressions anymore. It'll still be there, but you'll just acknowledge it and just move on. And more this practice continues, then eventually the samskara will evaporate itself.
Yes, that's it. Because you're constantly in the present moment. So you're constantly abiding as Purusha, as a pure awareness. And in doing that, you're not engaging in... Your pure awareness is not engaging with Prakriti, which means you're not creating more karma. Which means if you're not creating more karma, you're not creating more samskaras.
Yeah.
You're not creating more latent impressions, which means then that your thoughts and your feelings and your emotions begin to slowly subside, which means that then the intervals just become massive. Like there are stories where yogis won't think for days. There are those sorts of stories. Stereotypically, you hear about some yogis that say that they don't have any sort of mental formation for a few hours. And, as meditation practices, some of us may have experienced that as well. And that's kind of one of the points of yoga, right? You stop this cycle of karma, vasanas, and samskaras, because then you don't contribute to, as you were saying, you're not contributing to any ragya in the world, which your focus is vairagya. And no karma, you're not accumulating any karma, which reinforces samskaras, and then those samskaras will be lived out in the future. You're stopping that. And what happens, as you alluded to, is that the samskaras we already have, we begin to lose attachment to them. They still exist, but because you're practicing Nirodha for long periods of time, the energy that you once invested in them, you've sold the shop.
Yes.
You've you've laid off all the workers and...
So it's sold. It's gone.
It's gone, yeah. So all there is the shell of the former business, but you're not actively engaged in it anymore. And so the idea is that if you keep practicing for longer periods of time, even those samskaras will begin to, as you said, evaporate. And then you won't be hostage then to your mind at all. Your storehouse consciousness will be completely empty.
And from that place, the awareness, this pure awareness is just pure. The silence is pure reflection of the Purusha.
It's pure reflection. The reflection of Purusha is silence. It's nothing. It's nothingness.
It's nothingness. Yes.
You know what I mean? It's without qualities. Prakriti is with qualities.
Yeah.
And so the reason why you begin to your mental formations begin to cease is because you're not coming from a place of qualities anymore. So if you are qualityless, what can be produced? Sure, there'll be a few little lingering samskaras will pop up here and that, but because of your evolution in the practice of vairagya, you won't have any attraction to those. They'll be like, as we mentioned in the previous episode, just like a cloud moving across the clear blue sky. Nothing. You just see it. Whatever. It doesn't hold power over you anymore.
Yeah, skies remains as the sky is always there.
Yes.
You remain at that place.
Yes.
Yeah. And you
Yeah.
just watch what comes and goes, but you just remain where you are.
Exactly. Exactly. And so you're stopping that. When you're in Nirodha, you're halting the movement of mind. The vrittis are slowly, and then your mind is tranquil. You know, and so the idea is that we can actually exist in our daily life like that. It's not just in our practice.
Yeah.
Patanjali is not. I mean, he is explaining this mind science to us, so that eventually we can walk around in our daily lives and be a complete empty vessel,
Yes.
or a reflection of Purusha, you know, without being possessed by Prakriti and then contributing to more samsara, you know.
Yeah, again, I think to me that's a pure sense of freedom. That not in a sense that people think of freedom is you can do whatever you want. That's not really how it is.
No.
The real sense of freedom is that you don't get moved by anything.
No.
You're untouchable.
Untouchable.
Yeah, you are really free from suffering. That's the ultimate liberation and freedom means.
Yeah, you don't have that weight, you know, so you're enlightened, so you are free like a butterfly and just moving with the wind effortlessly. And having samskaras, and you know, Patanjali mentions this, and having a lot of karma, that's what lives on past our current life.
Yes.
That's the weight, the energy
Yeah.
that lives on past our life.
Yeah, that's what the verse 19 says. These latent impressions incline one to be reborn after one leaves the body at death and is dissolved in nature.
Yes.
Yeah, that's why we want to let that go, right? We want to kind of destroy it in a sense. Yeah.
Well, in the modern world, as you were mentioning with freedom, we have this stupid idea that freedom has something to do with financial freedom or freedom and movement, like I just move around anywhere and this and that. And then Patanjali and Lao Tzu and Shankar and all these guys are just throwing their hands up going, leave them to it, you know. So, because that's not freedom from suffering. Once you are free from suffering, or you have emptied the storehouse out and you're constantly in Nirodha, you are completely free.
Yeah.
And that's what that's how this will be your last life.
Right.
Because you won't have that energy, the weight, keeping your, or having that weight actually is the jiva. The samskaras, the karma, the vasanas are the jiva, are the persona. You know what I mean?
That energy that holds you back to this Prakriti world, this material world.
Yeah, which is basically just your attention that's entangled with Prakriti. You're a pure awareness entangled with Prakriti, and then you've created this solidified sense of self, which then lives on past this life. Where the idea is we have to unravel that in this life, come back to pure awareness, and allow the jiva to just thin out, continually thin.
And cleanse all the latent impressions, samskaras.
Yes.
So that make this life as last.
Last life, yeah.
Leave this body is free from suffering completely.
Exactly. And sometimes you don't have to even clean the entire storehouse out. It's how much they possess you. So if you've had, you've had some past samskaras from 15 years ago that you still have, that annoy you, but you've gone through all the spiritual practice and it doesn't possess you anymore. It's just like a cloud in the sky. You'll still be free from suffering and essentially, well, according to Patanjali, this will be your last life again.
Yeah, that string has been chopped.
You're chopped.
Yeah.
And you're free.
Yeah.
So guys, we hope you enjoyed and we'll see you guys next time.